To death.
Love you, man.
Love you,
So
fella.
good to see you.
We about to do this.
So good to see this. I'm so happy. I love working for the UFC, but I love this more. If they came to me and they said no more fight companions, it's one or the other, I'm like, hey, it's been a great time, guys. It's been wonderful. I love you. I love going to the fights. I'll buy tickets. I'll go.
It's crazy how it was.
They would never do that.
It was just the idea was like a fantasy. Like, wouldn't it be fucking cool if you could come?
You and me.
It was just a fantasy.
You and me.
And then it happened.
First of all, if manifesting is real, Eddie Bravo and I manifested the Fertittas buying the UFC. Eddie Bravo and I were friends in the 90s before the UFC went big, and we were hanging out, what was it, Louisiana or some shit?
Kemper, Louisiana.
We were in the middle of nowhere with Ricky Rocket.
Frank Shamrock, Igor Zinoviev.
Yeah, Ricky Rocket, who was, from Poison, is a legit jiu-jitsu guy. So Ricky was friends with Eddie. Eddie and I were friends. We all know each other from Machados. We're hanging out. We're like, you know what the UFC needs? Some fucking billionaires who love the sport, who just go crazy and dump a bunch of money. We know how exciting it is. Like, we knew we would go live. Like, everybody loves it. Anyone there loves it. It's not like it's a niche thing that only people, like, try bringing cricket to America. Like, no. We're not gonna play cricket.
The crazy thing is the UFC got canceled.
Yes.
The UFC legit got canceled. They got all their shit unplugged.
It was only available on DirecTV. I got DirecTV just instead of cable, just so I could get the UFC.
Do you remember how it went down? John McCain was involved.
Yes,
he's
Budweiser.
People forget about
Budweiser and
this.
boxing.
UFC got big.
Budweiser and boxing. Some boxing people conspired to make the UFC illegal. They were calling it. McCain was calling it human cockfighting.
And he said something. He was like either he was governor of Arizona or a senator or something, but he had the power to stop programs from coming through cable through his state. I don't know how that works, but he got pressure from the boxing world.
It was a small audience back then, and it was easy to kill them because it looked bad. Like when I was on news radio and I first started doing UFC backstage interviews, that's what I do, post-fight interviews. They came to me like, "What are you doing?" It was like I was doing porn. It was like I'm just fucking that, bro. Who doesn't like to fuck? I was like filming videos while I'm also doing NBC. I'm doing a sitcom.
That video is so viral right now. For some reason, you on Conan O'Brien.
But that's later.
Huge right now.
But that's later. That's after the UFC was bought by the Fertittas. Yes, that's what we manifested.
Oh, still back
dude,
when the fight started.
I swear to God, you and me getting blasted.
It was kind of this like the natural thing to happen. You know what I mean?
Who the fuck is gonna do it? Yeah. You would have. They were $44 million in the hole. They tried for $44 million. They were ready to sell. They called Dana White and they said, "Sell it. We're losing too much money." And then Lorenzo slept on it, and he woke up in the morning. He goes, "Fuck it,
savage.
Fuck it. We ride."
You need a maverick.
He goes, "We're
like
gonna ride it out, and we're gonna buy all the ads on the Ultimate Fighter. We'll buy the ads. We'll just put it on TV. We'll just give it this one last fucking Hail Mary." And then Forrest Griffin and Stephen Bonner go to war. They go to war.
TV.
And like 6-7 million people are watching. It starts off like 1 million. And people start calling each other. Go, "Yo, you got to turn on Spike TV. These dudes are beating the fuck out of each other." It was so wild because it was so perfectly matched. Yep. It was so perfectly matched. There was no one who had an advantage over either one of them. They knew each other for 6 weeks in that fucking house.
And they looked apart.
They looked apart, and they went to war.
Savage.
They went to war. And it was like, as close if and at the end of it, Dana and I were talking. He's like, "I think I'm going to give them both a contract." I will give them both a fucking contract. This is incredible. And Dana goes out there, and they had a conversation with Lorenzo. They both got a contract. The place goes nuts. And then the UFC is born. And Chuck Liddell was their champion. So you got Chuck Liddell, who's knocking people into other dimensions. So you got the #1 guy, the most exciting guy. In the beginning of the sport, Chuck Liddell was above and beyond anybody else. Because there was no tactics. It was, "I'm going to kill you." He was running at guys. He had great skills, but he just also had an iron chin, and he was just smashing people.
And he had the
smashing
look.
people.
Marketing
Perfect
had the look.
Tattooed head, mohawk, smashing people.
Iceman. The nickname Iceman. The shorts, the ice shorts.
The fucking show blew up. It blew up. And Eddie and I were there in the very beginning. We were like, "Whoa, they did it. I remember us having these conversations. Like, it's literally what we used to talk about in the 90s, and it actually happened.
But do you remember the first companion? And Brian you go, what should we call it? Brian goes, let's call it a silly goose time. And you go, fuck you. Do you remember that? You go, what should we call this show? And you're like, no, I got it. And Brian goes, no, let's call it a silly goose time.
Oh my God, we're not even watching this fight. Oh, so Arnold